Perfect. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Jack Cheesbrough from iPlan, which is a software solutions provider in the S&OP space, following on the theme of the last presentation, to talk to us about why AI is no longer optional in the S&OP space. Jack.
Thank you very much. Okay, so thank you so many people for coming to join this session. A great turnout. My name is Jack Cheesbrough. I am the CEO of iPlan. We are an integrated business planning solution for process manufacturing. There's going to be a manufacturing lens to some of the things we talk about today. What I want to use my 10 minutes for is to talk about the future of S&OP and why AI is no longer optional. And it's not because of the bling-bling functionality that we need tomorrow that we talked about earlier, but it's about the enablement of people and the time that it will be able to bring back to our planning organizations. I'm going to start by sketching out a typical S&OP process just so we know what we're kind of thinking about here in terms of scope. We've got a demand input, which is based on a forecast, both in terms of value and quantity for our customers and our products. We need to be thinking about our sources. Those might be both sources of manufacturing, so work centers, costs, rates, planning rules, shuts, constraints, as well as inventory in the network, external suppliers, transport costs. At the same time, we've got continuous incoming orders, which are changing the picture. They're always different to the demand because the forecast is always wrong. We've got our opening inventories. The output of the processes are the allocations, the raw materials, and the raw materials we need to acquire for the process, and eventually the executable plans. So our replenishment orders, our production orders, and our transport plans. And this is before the volcanoes then start erupting. Tariffs arrive, which force us to increase prices. Increases in oil change the costs of our transportation network. Trade barriers impact raw material availability and supply. They impact the orders we receive, which impacts our ability to forecast the demand, driving inefficiency in our manufacturing environment in terms of costs and rates, labor, energy, ultimately leading to us having the wrong stock in the wrong place at the wrong time. And yet 85% of us are still trying to do this in Excel. I think to get to one scenario with that level of complexity today is likely to take us the entire month. In fact, if an Excel process can deliver one scenario with that level of complexity in a month, that's a success. But how many scenarios do we need to manage this level of complexity? 2, 3, 4. I know some people in this audience that will be running over 20 scenarios a month to try and look at and mitigate the impacts of these different options. Tools like iPlan, and that's our software, allow us to bring this complexity together. But the secret is all about the separation of duties between artificial intelligence and the human planners that are making the decisions. So modern S&OP requires prescriptive analytics. And when we're looking at artificial intelligence, it's all about that drive towards prescriptive analytics. It's not AI for the sake of AI, but AI to drive prescriptive analytics. And what we mean by that. Descriptive analytics we're very used to, very useful in operations management, easy to visualize, handy. They tell us what happened, hindsight. Some Excel processes, but certainly many tools out there will help us with predictive analytics. So usually assumes a static model and predicts what's likely to happen. Prescriptive analytics is all about foresight. What are my options? It tests potential outcomes of each decision that we're trying to make and then recommends the best course of action. And that's the information that we need to make decisions as a planning organization. Really, 80% of the machine, the heavy lifting needs to be done by the software tool so that the rest of the time is spent by the planners making these decisions. If we're managing data for the whole month, we're not making any decisions at all. So let's separate the two. Artificial intelligence It consumes large, complex data sets. It searches for patterns and trends. It summarizes information. Human intelligence consumes information, insights, prescriptive data. We make critical, wide-reaching decisions. Don't ask the human to manage the trends and patterns of large data sets. And don't ask the AI to make the final critical decisions that we need to lead our organizations. So I wanted to share a bit about what we do in iPlan around artificial intelligence. I've got our typical, well-known S&OP process: demand management, demand planning, supply planning, executive S&OP process, and then an add-on there in demand sensing, managing real-time incoming orders. From an artificial intelligence point of view, the kind of things that we're asking the machine to do in iPlan: detect super sessions, so where we've had products that have phased out or we've brought new products in, finding those points in the data set and cleaning that history so we're not doing that manually. Finding outliers in the data and identifying if they are events that we know about and are expecting to happen again so we can shape the future demand picture, or we'll call outliers and make sure they are not impacting the future forecast that we make. Segmenting the demand so that we can identify, based on the variability of demand, which things we should be making to order, making to stock, or a combination of the two. And what does that do from a planning perspective? Well, it allows us to work with clean, organized data and apply planning rules to work out how best to satisfy that demand. As we move into the demand planning process itself, AI helps us look at what aggregate levels in the data we should be performing our analysis, our forecasting, our statistics, or machine learning or otherwise. It also helps us with selecting the right method, so testing multiple methods, finding the most appropriate method and applying that method for the data. That can be statistical, traditional methods, but also machine learning and other time series analysis ways in which we can use that kind of functionality. Also allows us to bring in external trends, because focusing entirely on historical data to shape the forecast and the demand picture is no longer possible. So external trends are really important. And finally, new product introduction. So using the shape and picture of previously introduced products in order to shape the future picture. From a planning perspective, when we have that capability within our demand planning process, that allows us to work, or it allows the tool to work on forecast accuracy so that the planners can work on forecast value add. So it's operating by exception where we need to make changes to the forecast. From a supply planning perspective, we can be thinking about dynamic shut planning. So where should we make change? Where should we plan events within our manufacturing calendar based on the picture of demand? And also automatic cycle determination. So moving from an inside-out to an outside-in organization that is looking at the profile of the demand and planning the manufacturing cycle around those. This allows, again, planners to work with rules and sequences that are suggested by the tool. And then as we move into the executive S&OP process, this is where we see more of the kind of generative AI type of work, allowing us to compare scenarios, look at the differences, trade-offs, use command prompts to ask questions. We've got all this data in our system. How do we get it into the hands of our planners very quickly? And how do we help them to explain to their boss why we're making this decision or this strategic direction in this monthly S&OP cycle? Which I think I've just explained there. So finally, demand sensing. This is in iPlan, this is actually looking at real-time incoming orders and how they compare to the sales and operations plan and the commitments that we've made, the reservations we've made on our machines. So this is about looking at the historical pattern of orders. When do they arrive? And using probabilistic forecasts to determine whether our allocations, quotas should be shifting based on that change in demand. And again, it just allows the dynamic changes of our allocations and quotas based off the order patterns that can be picked up by these deep learning models. So that's something I wanted to share with us today. We can talk more, and we can talk iPlan. You can see iPlan at our stall during the coffee break and beyond. Reach out to us, whether you are a manufacturer or somebody that would benefit from some of the tools we can share, but also if you're a startup or organization that would like to work with us, we're open to talk to everybody, so please come and join us. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Jack.
Cheers.
Really like the slide in particular where you looked at the transition from descriptive to prescriptive analytics. Laid out really well. Are we sharing the decks afterwards? Do you know? We are. So yeah, that for me is one of the keep it slides. Thanks again.
Thanks,
like I said, we've got 20 minutes break until the next session, so 10 past the hour, which means before your next coffee. We have time for a couple of questions. Really, no one's got a question on how probabilistic forecasts are going to be better for you than the deterministic forecast you're currently using?
Do you also see a use case of using generative AI for external data, like maybe social media data or other
Hold on.
applications?
So the question was, does he see a use case for using generative AI for external data like social media and other sources?
Yeah, so one of the key things that we're bringing now into most of our customer cases is the data that they have available to look at, things that are going to impact the forecast at the moment. Social media as such and what's happening in social media is not a use case that I've experimented with or we've experimented within yet. But data from various different outlets around incoming order patterns, certain markets and countries, even down to GDP for a certain area of a country, they all impact the forecast. And the process in iPlan is, again, it's about giving lots of data, lots of information to the model. A human being wouldn't be able to sit through all those trends and apply those trends and decide how they're going to impact my forecast. But a model, a machine learning model, can look at the applicability of those data sets, and it will impact how much they influence the forecast. So if there's a high degree of correlation, that's going to have a big impact on your forecast going forward or not. So we're using a lot of that in our cases. And it is, I would say, one of the only ways to improve forecast accuracy in the kind of environment that we're talking about now. Sales history alone, which was our legacy forecasting method for many years, is no longer enough to get the forecast that we need.
To add on to the question, which you didn't ask me, but I'll answer anyway, I do know that the folks at L'Oreal have a pretty well-published use case, and you're nodding so you know about it, where it's already a few years old, that scraping social media sentiment on a particular shade of lipstick that Lady Gaga was wearing when it began to trend had a direct knock-on effect on a series of SKUs within a couple of days. So there are companies out there really getting behind using generative AI as a predictive input to their demand sensing capabilities. It's not going to work in all verticals, of course. If you're buying a multi-million-dollar piece of Caterpillar equipment, doesn't really matter what color lipstick Lady Gaga's wearing. But in some applications, definitely it's there. Any other questions for Jack? Victoria.
So
the question was, she wants to know if the demand sensing is being done on a weekly or a monthly basis.
yeah, so in iPlan, what we're doing, we're taking a monthly picture of demand, and we're looking at allocating those to kind of weekly manufacturing buckets. With demand sensing, we're looking at the total operations, so it's not sort of manufacturing plant specific. We're looking at the total demand and able to make decisions about whether we should hold the reservations we've made for certain customers on certain machines or whether we should let that capacity go. We hold the capacity for last minute orders we're expecting based on the forecast, but almost with every order that comes in, it has some impact on the amount of resources we're allocating. So it's this continuous process of micro adjustments that can, at any point during that horizon, be delivered as executable plans. So we manage, from a demand sensing point of view, how our production quotas and allocations look, and then we release those to update the production plan. And sometimes, if we're seeing, from a demand sensing point of view, the orders are so far away from the forecast that we imagined, that's when we revert back to the S&OP process and run an optimization again and get a new picture to start with in terms of allocations, and then we change and adjust those, continue that process then of demand sensing and understanding whether we've made the right kind of plan.
Perfect, thanks. I don't want anyone else to feel the weight of responsibility of getting in the way of the coffees that everyone else wants to have, so I'm going to call that it for questions. Thanks again for your attention for the session. Reminder again, we don't start on the hour. It'll be 10 minutes past the hour. Thanks very much.
Thank you.